When was the last time you actually trusted the label on your breakfast sausage? Because here's a question that should make you put down that fork for a second. What if some of the biggest, most beloved sausage brands in America, the ones in your fridge right now, have been caught in court in USDA recall records or in their own ingredient lists, not being 100% what they claim on the front of the package? Before we get into it, if you care about what's actually going into your body, do me a favor, subscribe to the channel and smash that like button. It genuinely helps this kind of investigation reach more people. And trust me, after today's list, you're going to want to see what we dig up next. Okay, let's get into it. Sausage is one of the most American foods there is. Grill season, breakfast plates, gas station hot dogs, tailgates, it's everywhere. And the marketing around it is built on a few very specific words. Natural, premium, 100% pork, no preservatives, whole grain, uncured. Words that sound simple. Words that sound honest. Words that, as you're about to see, don't always mean what you think they mean, and in several cases have ended up at the center of lawsuits, recalls, and regulatory headaches. We went through court filings, USDA Food Safety and Inspection Service recall notices, and consumer class actions to find 7 real, documented cases where a major U.S. sausage brand's claims didn't quite line up with reality. This isn't about random internet rumors. This is about actual paperwork, lawsuits filed in federal court, recalls posted by the USDA, and ingredient lists you can check yourself. Let's start with number 1. Number 1, Johnsonville, 100% premium pork that wasn't quite 100% pork. Johnsonville is one of the most recognized sausage brands in the country, a Wisconsin institution that built its whole identity on quality and tradition. So when a class action lawsuit landed accusing the company of mislabeling its beer brats, it caught a lot of people off guard. The lawsuit alleged that Johnsonville marketed certain beer brat products as containing 100% premium pork, when in fact the casings wrapped around that pork were made from beef, not pork. According to the complaint, the plaintiff argued this wasn't just a technicality. It mattered to people who avoid beef for religious, dietary, or health reasons, and to anyone who simply expected a 100% pork product to be, well, 100% pork, casing included. The suit claimed the company made these statements knowing they could mislead a reasonable shopper standing in the meat aisle reading the front label. Now, to be fair to Johnsonville here, USDA labeling rules around casings are genuinely confusing. Federal regulations state that a casing doesn't need to be specifically called out on the label if it comes from the same species as the meat inside it. But if the casing is from a different animal than the meat in the sausage, federal rules require it to be disclosed. That's exactly the kind of technical gap that turns a premium pork claim into a legal gray zone, and exactly the kind of gap class action attorneys love to find. This wasn't Johnsonville's only headline-making issue. The company has also dealt with a string of USDA recalls over the past few years. Pork sausage links pulled because of black plastic fibers found inside them. Turkey kielbasa recalled because consumers found pieces of rubber, and cheddar bratwurst recalled for hard plastic contamination. None of these are about false claims exactly. They're about quality control. But when you put 100% premium pork on the front of a package and then have multiple foreign material recalls behind the scenes, it starts to chip away at the premium part of that promise. Number 2, Boar's Head, the premium quality brand behind the worst listeria outbreak in a decade. If there's one brand whose entire image is built on the word premium, it's Boar's Head. Black and gold packaging, the slogan about deli excellence, the implication that you're buying something better than the cheap stuff. And for a lot of people, that branding worked. Boar's Head became the deli meat and sausage brand you trusted at the counter. Then came 2024. A liverwurst sample tested by Maryland health officials came back positive for Listeria monocytogenes, tied to an outbreak that had already been making people sick for weeks. Boar's Head recalled around 207,000 pounds of liverwurst and related products at first. 4 days later, that recall ballooned to more than 7 million pounds of meat and poultry products, including multiple sausage varieties, bologna, ham, and salami, all traced back to a single processing plant in Jarrett, Virginia. By the time the dust settled, health officials had confirmed dozens of illnesses across nearly 20 states, dozens of hospitalizations, and 10 deaths linked to the outbreak, making it the largest listeriosis outbreak in the United States in over a decade. USDA inspection records released afterward described conditions at the plant that included mold, mildew, cobwebs, and insects found repeatedly throughout the facility. Food safety experts who reviewed the company's contamination control procedures publicly criticized them as outdated compared to industry best practices used elsewhere. By September of that year, at least 7 separate lawsuits, 3 of them class actions, have been filed against Boar's Head, alleging breach of warranty, failure to disclose contamination risk, false advertising, manufacturing defects, and even wrongful death. The company ultimately closed the Jarrett plant permanently and discontinued its liverwurst line entirely. The point here isn't to relitigate a tragedy for shock value. It's to highlight the gap between brand promise and operational reality. A company that markets itself on the word premium had USDA records showing basic sanitation failures at the facility producing that premium product. That's about as direct a contradiction between marketing language and documented fact as you'll find in the entire food industry. Number 3. Hillshire Farm/Jimmy Dean, the whole grain that wasn't quite whole grain. Hillshire Brands, the parent company behind Hillshire Farm smoked sausage and the breakfast empire that is Jimmy Dean, has long marketed certain product around health-conscious buzzwords like whole grain, appealing to people trying to make slightly better breakfast choices without giving up sausage entirely. In 2021, a consumer filed a class action lawsuit alleging that Jimmy Dean Delight's breakfast sandwiches were deceptively labeled as being made with whole grain, when the actual grain content didn't support that claim the way a reasonable shopper would expect. This kind of lawsuit follows a now familiar pattern in food labeling litigation. A front-of-package claim implies one thing. The actual nutritional makeup or ingredient ratio tells a more complicated story, and the gap between the two becomes the basis for a legal complaint. Hillshire's sausage division hasn't been immune to quality control issues either. In 2023, the USDA's Food Safety and Inspection Service announced a recall of nearly 16,000 pounds of Hillshire Farm smoked sausage, a blend of pork, turkey, and beef, over concerns about bone fragment contamination. The products had already been shipped to retail stores across 7 states, including California, New York, and Pennsylvania, before the recall was issued. None of this means Hillshire or Jimmy Dean are uniquely bad actors. Recalls happen across the entire meat industry, and most are resolved with 0 serious injuries. But it does mean that the wholesome, comforting whole grain breakfast image these brands have spent decades building has, at least twice in recent memory, run directly into a courtroom or a USDA recall notice. Number 4. Al Fresco KM Foods. All natural doesn't mean what you think it means. Here's where things get genuinely tricky, because this one isn't really about al fresco lying. It's about an entire labeling category that's basically a legal loophole the size of a barn door. KM Foods, the company behind the al fresco chicken sausage brand, markets its products explicitly as all natural, right there on the package, often paired with feel-good details like Vermont-made syrup for its sweet apple variety. In 2025, that exact product, Al Fresco's all-natural chicken sausage with sweet apple and Vermont maple syrup, was recalled by the USDA after multiple consumers reported finding white pieces of plastic inside the sausage. Here's the deeper issue, and it applies way beyond just al fresco. The term natural has essentially no enforceable legal definition when it comes to USDA-regulated meat products. The USDA and FDA have never formally defined what natural means on a food label in a way that would prevent a company from using it pretty much however it wants, as long as it doesn't contain certain synthetic additives. Legal experts and consumer advocacy groups have pointed out repeatedly that natural, all natural, and 100% natural labels can appear on products that still contain things like added sugars, GMO-derived ingredients, or industrially processed components, because there's no single agreed-upon standard the word has to meet. So when a product branded as all natural ends up in a recall for plastic contamination, it's not technically a violation of the natural claim itself. Plastic fragments aren't an ingredient, they're a manufacturing defect. But it does highlight something worth remembering. A reassuring word on the front of the package tells you almost nothing about what actually happens on the production line behind it. All natural is a marketing choice, not a quality guarantee, and definitely not a safety guarantee. Number 5. Oscar Mayer, the uncured sausage that's still technically cured. This one is sneaky, and once you understand it, you'll start spotting it on dozens of products in your grocery store, not just sausage. Oscar Mayer's Select's natural line of hardwood smoked turkey sausage proudly states on the package that it has no added nitrates or nitrites, except in much smaller print right after that claim, an important qualifier, except those occurring naturally in celery juice and sea salt. Here's why that qualifier matters so much. Sodium nitrite is the chemical compound that's been used for decades to cure meat, preserve color, and prevent bacterial growth, including the bacteria responsible for botulism. When a product says uncured or no nitrates added, many shoppers assume the meat is genuinely free of nitrites altogether. But celery juice and celery powder are naturally extremely high in nitrates, which convert into nitrites during processing, meaning these uncured products often end up with similar, and sometimes even higher, nitrite levels than traditionally cured sausage that's honest about using sodium nitrite directly. This isn't unique to Oscar Mayer. It's an industry-wide labeling workaround used by major and natural brands alike, and it's been flagged repeatedly by food science writers, registered dietitians, and regulatory commentators as one of the most misleading but technically legal tricks in modern meat labeling. The product genuinely contains added nitrites. It's just sourced from a vegetable instead of a lab-synthesized salt, which allows the word uncured or no nitrates added to legally stay on the front of the package, even though chemically very little has actually changed for your body. So when you pick up a package that proudly proclaims no nitrates added and pay a premium for that reassurance, you may be getting almost exactly the same nitrite exposure as the cheaper sausage sitting right next to it. The claim is technically true. The implication most shoppers walk away with is not. Number 6. Eckrich, the natural casing sausage with a not so natural ingredient list. Eckrich, owned by Conagra Brands, is one of the most recognizable names in dinner sausage, sitting near the top of sales charts for smoked sausage for years. Its products often lean on imagery and packaging cues, natural casing, rustic branding, classic Americana design, that suggest a simpler, more traditional product. But food reviewers who've actually broken down Eckrich ingredient panels have flagged a different story. Products like the Eckrich Natural Casing Smoked Sausage Rope list sodium nitrate, sodium phosphate, and monosodium glutamate among their ingredients. 3 additives that frequently top ingredients to watch out for lists for nutrition writers. Sodium phosphate has been associated with adverse reactions in people with certain kidney conditions, and nitrites, when consumed in protein-rich foods cooked at high heat, have been linked by some health researchers to increased cancer risk over the long term, a connection that's still actively studied and debated. To be clear, none of this makes Eckrich sausage illegal, mislabeled in a way that's been successfully sued over, or unsafe to eat in normal amounts. The word natural here technically refers to the casing, meaning it's made from actual animal intestine rather than collagen or plastic, not a claim about the entire ingredient list. But that's exactly the trick. Natural casing sounds like a wholesome promise about the whole product. In reality, it's a narrow, technical description of one single component, while the rest of the formulation can include exactly the kind of synthetic preservatives and flavor enhancers a health-conscious shopper might be trying to avoid by reaching for something with the word natural on it in the first place. Number 7. Bob Evans, the farm fresh image versus the fine print. Bob Evans built one of the most recognizable down-home, farm-fresh brand identities in American food. Folksy Packaging, a restaurant chain that leaned hard into rural nostalgia, and decades of marketing built around the idea of wholesome, simple cooking. Today, the Bob Evans Farms food brand is owned by Post Holdings, but the home-style image has carried over almost unchanged. That image has run into real friction with consumer protection law. In early 2026, a class action lawsuit was filed against Post Holdings alleging that Bob Evans macaroni and cheese was falsely marketed as containing no artificial preservatives, despite ingredients that plaintiffs argued didn't support that claim. While that specific case centers on a side dish rather than sausage, it matters for the brand as a whole. Bob Evans built its entire reputation on the implicit promise that everything under its name is simple, homemade, and additive light. A lawsuit alleging a false, no preservatives claim on one product line raises an obvious question about how rigorously that same promise has been kept across the rest of the Bob Evans lineup, including its sausage rolls and patties, which carry the exact same Farm Fresh branding. On the quality control side, Bob Evans Farms Foods has also had its own USDA recall. Roughly 7,500 pounds of Italian pork sausage products pulled from shelves after thin blue rubber fragments were found mixed into the product. Food critics who've taste-tested Bob Evans breakfast sausage patties side by side with competitors have also noted that the texture comes across as overly processed and machine uniform. Not exactly the rustic, farmhouse experience the packaging is selling. Put together, you get a brand whose entire marketing identity rests on words like farm, homestyle, and fresh, going up against rubber-contaminated recalls and a fresh lawsuit over preservative claims on a flagship product line. That's not proof of intentional deception across the board, but it's a pretty clear example of how far a brand's image can drift from the documented reality behind it. So what do you actually do with all this? Here's the honest takeaway. None of these 7 brands are running some kind of massive scam operation. Most of what we just walked through falls into a few repeating patterns. Technical labeling loopholes around words like natural, uncured, and premium that are legal but misleading. Recalls caused by manufacturing and quality control failures rather than intentional fraud. And a small number of genuine, documented lawsuits over specific claims that didn't match the actual product. But that's exactly why this stuff matters. The front of a sausage package is advertising copy, written by a marketing team, optimized to make you feel good about a purchase decision in about 2 seconds while you're standing in a cold grocery aisle. The actual truth about what's in that package and how carefully it was made lives in 3 other places: the ingredient list on the back, the USDA's public recall database, and, occasionally, a federal courthouse. A few practical habits make a real difference here. Flip the package over before you flip it into your cart, and actually read past the first 3 ingredients. If a product says uncured or no nitrates added, look for the words celery powder, celery juice, or celery juice powder right after it. That's your sign the nitrite story is more complicated than the front label suggests. Treat the word natural as essentially meaningless from a regulatory standpoint, because legally it almost is. And if you want to check whether your favorite brand has had a recent recall, the USDA Food Safety and Inspection Service publishes every single one, searchable by brand name, completely free, going back years. None of this is meant to make you afraid of sausage. It's meant to make you a little harder to fool, which, frankly, is the whole point of digging into stuff like this. If this kind of investigation is useful to you, this is exactly the kind of content we're going to keep making, pulling real lawsuits, real recalls, and real ingredient data on the brands sitting in your fridge right now. So if you made it this far, do 2 things for me. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next one, and drop a like on this video. It takes 2 seconds, it costs you nothing, and it tells the algorithm to put this kind of consumer protection content in front of more people who need to see it. Let me know in the comments which brand on this list surprised you the most. And if there's a product you want us to investigate next, drop the name below. We read every single comment, and a lot of the brands on future lists are going to come directly from your suggestions. Thanks for watching. Stay sharp the next time you're in the meat aisle, and we'll see you in the next one.